This meeting is being live streamed.
All right.
Got it.
We are live streaming
So,
to Facebook,
Brent,
Twitter,
by staying in this meeting, you consent to being live streamed.
YouTube, and LinkedIn.
I consent to nothing.
We're about to start the Gillmor Gang show. We're getting ready for anybody who is tuning in.
I consent to
Nothing.
We're about to start Gillmor
That what is that, Frank?
Done, fixed.
Gang.
But how did I know who it was? Isn't that interesting?
I thought you hated that word.
I do. When you
Yeah.
said,
Which word?
Interesting.
Interesting.
see how that feels? I mean, I said that to you once 6 weeks ago, and it's still
No, it's right here. Stuck.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the Big Bang. It just keeps reverberating.
Yeah, doesn't it?
Okay, Tina, are we streaming?
We are indeed.
Oh, man.
We're streaming. Brent, let us know that in the first seconds.
Okay.
Hello, happy men. Looking good. Sunday best and all. Dennis looks warm, I hope.
Oh yeah, probably too warm.
I know it's getting cold. Must be getting cold out there.
Yeah. Although my dog still swims.
So, Tina, how much? What's the ETA on mute is off?
And what?
What is the ETA on mute is off?
Anytime you're ready to go, Steve,
I
I'm
have-
ready to go.
Been ready for at least 30
Alrighty.
seconds.
Excellent. Okay, I'm gonna get my speaker there pinned, and here we go. And mute is off. And we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, and
Hi,
well, that's not sufficient.
Steve Gillmor here. This is the Gillmor Gang coming to you on a rare Sunday performance. And as such, I'd like to welcome the team, starting with Frank Radis in New York, I think it is.
I am. I'm still in New York, and I'll be here for about 2 more weeks, and hopefully that'll be the end of it. Hi, gang. Hello, Steve, Tina.
Hello.
Hi.
Sounded so ominous. In 2 weeks, that'll be the end of it? Really?
Well, I'm hoping to close on the sale of my apartment and move. That's yeah. And my problem is so different. It's really crazy the way they sell apartments in New York and all the rigmarole you have to go through to sell a piece of property or even to buy a piece of property. And I can't. I've booked my flight back 3 times and canceled it 3 times, and I've canceled 3 different movers to pick up my stuff and move it away because there's this co-op board thing that just keeps dragging on and on and on with the buyers. So anyway, I hate to bore you with that crap.
Well, fun.
Yeah.
In the Georgia, Atlanta area.
Or Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. Your lower third.
We call that
thing
reverse Polish notation.
Your lower third thing just censored the word crap.
What lower third thing?
It's typing out the lower thirds about
What
what,
is
we're
it?
saying.
Are you talking about Facebook?
Yeah, and on my phone, you can see the. Oh,
Wow.
you can't do it this way. You can see the words. It comes up like a movie, French movies with lower thirds in English, and the word crap was censored.
Well, there's
Probably a few times now.
the
Now,
multiverse
is
for
it being
you.
censored every time you repeat it?
I'm looking to see if it did it. Yes, it did it again.
I'm glad to see Facebook
The
is
word-
on the case.
The word bleep has been.
I hate to
Yeah.
butt in. I hate to butt into this sparkling conversation here, but we just had some breaking news here in Georgia. David Perdue is going to run for governor of Georgia against Brian Kemp. It's,
Wow.
I mean, that's kind of interesting. That's telling you that the Trump faction is large and in charge still because they don't like Brian Kemp down here.
That's beautiful.
Well,
I'm good with that. I don't like him much either. So the guy who was just speaking with this raw hot off the presses political analysis is Brent Leary.
Didn't you already announce me?
Yeah, but
I
we can-
started to, and then we were interrupted by the,
By me,
yeah.
Crap.
Crap.
by me, by that crap. Or as they say in the Middle East, crap.
But Frank is not ADD, everyone. He isn't really.
What?
So
Huh?
notice how Keith is trying to get into the show by changing the subject. So, Brent, you need to say hi or some sort of thing so I can lose the third.
Yeah, all right.
What's up?
Perfect. I'm not going to take the bait on Keith. So we'll go to Michael Markman. Welcome, Michael.
How do you do? Greetings from the Pacific Northwest.
And to what do we owe the lack of imposing mountain in the upper left?
Clouds. You know, unlike in my photograph, the actual mountain comes and goes. It's hidden most of the time. You don't see it. And then
So is this a real picture or
this is a real picture.
that you were superimposing over your Zoom call, correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's not a live background. It's a photo, which I have intentionally blurred.
He did the Frank thing.
That's right.
Frank did that last week.
Yeah, he was the innovator. In the upper left-hand corner, at least on my screen, which I'm not allowed to say, is Dennis Pombriant. Welcome, Dennis.
Hey, Steve, just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that there is a cream cheese shortage in New York.
Yeah,
And it's rippling up and down the East Coast. It has dire consequences for cheesecake and bagels.
And bagels, yeah. Geez.
Yeah. Yeah. Moment of
You know,
silence.
we have a little bit of a shortage here in Seattle. I mean, at least Philadelphia brand cream cheese is frequently out of the dairy case in my store.
Yeah, it's a thing.
I have to use the store brand, the private label brand, whatever that is.
What's this due to?
Increased demand for one thing. Demand's up 35% according to the article I read. Lots of bakeries are trying to get ahead on cheesecake, and
Wow.
I think a lot of people are just returning to the delis.
Wow.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Well, I can tell you that the deli on Columbus Avenue was so crowded when I walked past it this morning. There's this place called Zucker's, very popular at 73rd in Columbus, and the line goes down a block every single Sunday. It's crazy. I haven't tried it yet, but it's about bagels and coffee. That's what they're about.
Mm.
Yeah.
When I was in college, we used to drive down in Boston. We used to drive down to H&H Bagels just to stock up and then drive back.
Mm.
That's when we had a lot of free time.
I
The
want to say
gasoline was
that
23 cents.
I remember when it was 35 cents when I was in college.
This is gripping stuff, guys. Where are you
Oh,
pulling
that's
this
right.
stuff from?
Well, I'll tell you
And
what.
that,
let's
that
talk-
voice belongs to Keith Tier.
Nice to be here with my. I've got my genuine bokeh lens on my camera, so this is not digital blur. This is analog blur.
Ah,
You-
I thought you
using-
smeared some cream cheese on the lens.
I've got some analog blur right here. I can't see a
You
thing.
throwing it on telephoto there, Keith? Little telephoto action.
It's a little, this lens is 70 millimeters. So
That's fast enough. So it's probably you've got a big wide open iris too.
So what did we think about the Beatles Get Back show?
I'm amazed by it. I was watching it again last night. I'm only in episode 2, just after George comes back after previously walking out.
Mm.
Ugh, spoiler alert.
Well,
Oh, everybody
I don't
knows
know.
that now.
but to see the sausage being made is just fascinating to me. And there's lots of things I didn't know. Like, I mean, they kind of seem happy and totally self-aware that the journey's coming to an end, but without any acrimony or anything. It's really just to do with boredom. And, you know, Paul makes this amazing statement about Yoko, you know, because the rap that Paul gets is that Yoko was the problem and he didn't like her, but actually he has a completely generous spirit and a really good understanding of how important Yoko is to John. So I just thought, wow, making up lyrics. And I just did a 3-day offsite for my new startup. It's kind of the same. It's you know, you're only 10% there. You're in the room. You talk to each other and stuff happens. That's what it evokes to me. It's just amazing. I think it's a great documentary.
I agree.
One of my friends wrote, "We know the songs, but they don't. We know exactly what those songs are, but they haven't found them yet." And it's fascinating watching them get there. For them, it's an act of suspense. For us, it's an act of recovering the revelation. You know, I think back to all the films I've seen that are biographies of musicians, you know, going back to the George Gershwin story and the story of Queen, and even most recently, Tick, Tick, Boom, the story of Jonathan Larson. And they all have scenes with composers trying to write music. None of them seem real. None of them ever seem real.
I
This
was
is the first real scene of a composer writing music that I've ever seen.
there was a way that they went about doing the lyrics, which I was like, oh damn, they just given away the secret of writing lyrics in a studio session, and that is to just sing out gibberish as long as it's in the melody and it goes against the track. So it's in a, you know, Jetta was in my back along my legs. You know, it was really interesting to see that get explained. I also thought the quality of the 16 millimeter film was astounding. It looked like 35 millimeter film or video in many cases. That blew me
Of course,
away.
that wasn't the quality of the 16 millimeter.
Absolutely not. But and it couldn't
post-production.
Absolutely. And it could never have been done back when they shot that film. And of course, they shot it on 16 because they thought it was going to be a TV show and not a feature film. But I thought that overall, watching the sausage be made was the most interesting thing for me. I loved it. I thought it was just fantastic. And I especially like how it resolved.
The biggest, the statement to me that stuck with me was, if he doesn't come back by Tuesday, we'll get Clapton. And I thought that within that sentence, which I think came from John, or it could have been Paul, but I think it was from John.
I think it was John.
It was John. Within that sentence was the friendship, the love, the professionalism, and the dispassionateness all blended together.
Yeah.
They're very aware it's a business. They're very aware it's a business as well.
The line where he said, get an 8-track, the make EMI pay for it. The Beach Boys had one.
You know,
and then they had to borrow it.
It was also a
George
huge amount of audio processing. Because apparently when George and John wanted to talk, they would turn their amps up and noodle on their guitars aimlessly to cover up what they were saying. And Jackson's crew was able to pull out the dialogue and suppress the music.
It was great.
No,
Dennis,
hiding,
have you seen it?
No hiding from AI. It reminded me of The Conversation. You ever see that old Coppola film where
Great movie.
Gene Hackman has recorded something that he can't quite hear because of all the street noise, and he spends his time using analog equipment trying to isolate the dialogue so that he can find out what people are saying. We got better tools than he did.
Yeah. Hell, my phone has better tools than he had. I think, wasn't that a recording that he did from a telephone on the street? Somebody was, there was some street, and street noise was because somebody that was on that line was in the street on a phone booth.
Yeah, I've lost the details.
Great movie too.
So that's all we have to say about the Beatles?
No. There's endless amounts to say about it. I think,
Yeah.
but I think the outlines are all there. We just need to dig in a little deeper. The amount of affection and communication among these people was amazing. Even when they were having disagreements, they weren't unpleasant.
It was hard for me to look at them and think that they were like between 26 and 28 or so when that film was made. That just was astounding to me, because it felt, except for, if you looked at the console in the control room with those big honking faders on it and those giant knobs, those very 60s looking control room, and then the 8-track Studer and all that stuff, very, old. But then you go into that room and the good instruments are the same, and the good amplifiers are the same, the good drums are the same. And they're the same musicians. They're just 26 and 28. That was astounding to me.
The one time that I met George Harrison, I was struck by how old he looked.
Really?
Yeah, it was like somebody who'd lived 1,000 years, basically.
Keith Richards. Somebody posted a picture of Keith Richards holding on to a baby, and the tagline was Keith Richards holding Betty White.
Kind of reminds me of Mel Brooks, the 2,000-year-old man.
Yeah.
There's a Mel Brooks podcast I just read about that's supposedly coming in the next few days. A very long interview with Mel Brooks about his life and history. I'm looking forward to hearing that.
He's just published his autobiography. And if you get the audiobook of his autobiography, he will read it to you. I can't keep away from Audible. It's the greatest invention. It's just so great. It is, and especially when you get the Audible originals that are done with casts of people, they're astounding. They're so good. It's just like listening to radio in the 50s, but with quality. You mentioned the Jonathan Carl book, the production quality there. Could you say a little about that?
I thought, well, first of all, the book was just filled with astounding stuff. But what I liked about it, aside from the fact that it was Jonathan Carl, who is actually a pretty good voice guy, reading his book, but the way that they intersperse natural sound, which is exactly what you would do if you were making a radio news report, or what we used to call rosers, which were recorded on the scene radio. And it was done very well. He would talk about the things that he talked about in his book and then actually use the natural sound of the audio that he quoted. And they didn't do it so much that it became annoying, that they just did the right amount. And I thought it was just great. It takes audiobooks to the next step.
Yeah, I've been reading the book. Doesn't have the audio, and it is an amazing book because you go through events that we all know from their public face, and he throws in things that you had no idea about that were happening backstage.
Yeah, it was tremendous. I put on I see it got really quiet there for a second, so I'm going to put on the brakes and make a left turn to a conversation that Michael and I have been having on Facebook a little bit about Cuomo and that story, which I find to be very sad. On the one hand,
Chris Cuomo.
Yes, and I have a friend who worked with him on his show at ABC, and she actually thinks she knows who the person was from ABC that was the one that came in just recently, the one whose name was thrown into the hat, which I found also very sad. And it feels like, to me, it just feels just so bad for journalism, but so bad for the Cuomos, and so bad for CNN, and so bad for us. To know that even the good guys aren't the good guys. It's at Fox, it's good to be bad. At CNN, it was bad to be bad until now. This whole thing bothers me.
So Frank, I read this morning about him being fired, and I read that he had been helping his brother, but I don't know much beyond that. Has he actually done anything egregious? And that's a genuine question, because if if all he's done is helped his brother with advice, then you wonder what the fuss is about.
Well, from what I've heard, and Michael, I think you can probably add to this some color to it, but from what I've heard is that he utilized his sources to drag up dirt on the people who were against his brother. This is one of the things that I read. That's pretty bad. The second thing is, and it didn't say this, but I know that sometimes this is how it works, is where a correspondent or a producer will ask the assignment desk to check on something for them. So now they're using resources that he may not have done that. And I don't mean to throw that in, but I can tell you that happens. And you're not supposed to do that either. So there's, and you know, at the very beginning of the whole thing, he did say, he did mention the story, and he said he didn't want to be a part of reporting the story, which I thought was good, but it just fell apart from there.
After watching the morning show, you know, you become incredibly untrusting of the bosses of the networks. And especially in these times when, you know, normal people who are flawed do things which, you know, in different times would be considered normal, but end up having to be fired because of bowing to the times. You just wonder whether Chris Cuomo is a victim or whether he is, you know, the person who did something wrong.
Well, the details are not all available yet, but a lot of his communications and texts were released by the Attorney General of New York, Tish James, and it was, as Frank said, not just that he was advising his brother, but he was using his resources to discredit some of the accusers, and I mean that they're being very, let's say, ginger about what they're revealing so far. But apparently, there is stuff there that is more than just he was helping his brother.
There's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more coming out now. I think the floodgates are going to start opening because the ABC, the story about the person at ABC who complained about him was brand new. Hadn't heard that. Now because we hadn't heard that, the way that it had been projected on television was that this person came in late in the game, like it sounded like recently. But I think everybody knows, that is, those people investigating it, they know what they have. And they would not have let him go. They didn't have a lot of stuff. And you're right, we haven't heard it all yet.
Well, them letting him go, I mean, it's impossible to withstand the kind of scrutiny that he comes under when the Attorney General, who is meant to be, I guess, a prosecutor, decides to go public with an independent person who is not accused of anything's private texts, you know, and you're the CNN bosses, you know, the most likely thing you're going to do is the easy thing, which is let him go. It doesn't mean it's the right thing.
Yeah.
Well, what they say, and again, with no details, is that they engaged a law firm to do an independent investigation, and they let him go based on what that law firm came up with.
Yep. Also, probably not. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just suspicious that the easy thing isn't the right thing, and the easy thing is what happens these days, because nobody wants to stand up to that kind of scrutiny.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think
I don't either.
I think I could talk, but Dennis hasn't talked, so go ahead, Dennis.
I can talk after you. The thing that I would just point out is that Chris Cuomo didn't break any laws. Nobody's accusing him of that. What they're saying is that he had a failure of journalistic ethics, and with that failure of journalistic ethics, he's become tainted, so that he can't deliver the news for CNN anymore. That was the judgment of CNN, and I'm sure there's something built into his contract, into everybody's contracts. I mean, Frankie would know this. I don't.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's something built into the contract that says, hey, you have to remain above the fray.
Especially the on-camera talent.
Well, I don't agree with the idea of remaining above the fray. I think that everybody has conflicts and that they're in a real-time world, they're plain to see. What I think that the mistake that he made was he came to a point where he had to make a very difficult decision by his own account between supporting his brother and being on a top-rated show, and he chose to do both, and he was fired for it.
That's right. I totally agree with that. That's the other thing that was in my mind. Yeah, I mean, he could have avoided all of it. He could have been as partisan as he wanted to be if he wasn't also sitting on that stool at night.
I think that's true and accurate, but I suspect that journalists like Chris Cuomo, and Frank, you would know, have crossed this particular line in less focused circumstances many, 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 many times and not been fired. So I do suspect that the fact of what his brother's accused of and the times we're living in contribute to, the penalty he's having to pay for doing something that I suspect many journalists do all the time in different circumstances.
You're right, and yes, you're right. I just wonder how much more there is to this story politically. So, what is his father looking? What would his father say about this? This is about a family dynasty. This is the father, the two brothers. This is, there's also a sister. There's more here. And I don't know how deep it goes, but I have this sense that there's more here than just this particular instance, and that there's something political involved in this. And I don't know if it's an anti-Cuomo thing, if it's an anti-democratic thing. I don't know. I don't want to be the one that's throwing out all this shade if it's not true. But there's rumblings out there, and I think that time will tell.
Well, I think what his brother's accused of is the core of it, because there's no defending him at all. So clearly that factors in. That said, I have family that have done things that I strongly disapprove of, but they're still family, and you try and help them, including talking to them about what they're doing.
Right, but then you have to make a choice.
Yeah, you don't go to work and support them publicly.
Well, I actually think probably the right thing to do is to do it very publicly. What he probably didn't do is do it very publicly. He probably did it very quietly and therefore duplicitously. I don't
know how he could have done it very quietly. I think once he started reaching out to his
no, that's my point, Frank. That's my point. Sorry, I probably wasn't clear. I'm saying, had he been more public, like on day one, said, "Look, he's my brother, and I'm going to defend him. I'm doing this job here, but expect me to defend my brother. What you see is what you get." Probably that disclosure would have separated out his family relationship from his job.
Yeah, he did say that.
No, I don't think so.
He did say that, and it didn't help the situation. And he didn't make a hard decision, and neither did the network, because it was, at the time, it was the number one rated anchor on that network. So
there's always a dynamic in sexual harassment cases where the victim is attacked. She was asking for it, or she's a slut. There are all of these things that are done to discredit the person who comes forward. And the question, it's not just a question of helping and advising his brother and supporting his brother. The question is, did he take part in any of those activities? And I think that's the issue that's,
Yeah,
they're
but
hurting.
Michael, you'll probably agree that, you know, in a country that has habeas corpus, i.e., innocent until proven guilty, and knowing that in even these heinous sexual harassment cases, there's examples of both sides making things up, not in this particular case, but in cases in general, you have to reserve judgment until the facts are out.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with his decision to be on a global news network and at the same time doing his best for his family. I mean, it was a terrible decision that he had to make.
Yeah.
And you know, his comments after being fired, I thought were nuanced. You know, he said, you know, although I didn't, I'm paraphrasing, although I didn't want this to, you know, my situation with CNN to end like this, he understands what happened.
No, I think we're in consensus that CNN.
So what I'm not in consensus with what you've said earlier is that, you know, this goes on all the time or possibly goes on all the time. I don't think that has a lot to do with, I mean, that may be true, but, you know, this played out in real time on television. And
this was a perfect storm, actually. Everything about this story was happening at a time when everything about this story would have been scrutinized. And go ahead.
I was going to say, Frank, and I'm drawing on, you know, my own memories from TechCrunch and TechMeme and the tech industry, and that line between journalism and participation. And, you know, we are living in times where traditional journalism, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist anymore. Fox and MSNBC are both partisan observers and participants in what's happening. And they're certainly not neutral observers. CNN may be the closest to attempting to hold the line on neutral journalism, and therefore it makes a lot more sense in their case. But I think it's pretty hard to hold up standards of journalism in the times we're living through, because I don't think there's such a thing anymore.
So they shouldn't try?
I think I'd rather people declared their interests openly and leave me to judge what I think of their point of view, because I think they all do have a point of view these days.
Well, that's what in fact did happen with TechCrunch. You know, and some people benefited from that analysis and some did not.
Yep, I agree.
So I don't think the transparency is the issue. The notion of what journalistic ethics are, I think, is under I wouldn't call it attack, but it's difficult to understand. It's like when I hear about you know, the Democrats talking about you know, the crisis that's facing democracy, and that we're, you know, democracy is under attack. You know, I understand what they're saying, but are they really making a unbiased analysis of the situation from not just their point of view, but others? I don't think.
I think professional ethics in general, not just journalistic. I mean, if you ask the question, should the Attorney General have released private communications of a non-connected party? If you ask yourself, should the Supreme Court be talking about Roe versus Wade the way they're talking about it, that separation between your job and your point of view is gone. Is gone. Everyone.
I'm not sure I agree with that either. You know, the situation with Roe versus Wade, there was a lot of interesting analysis about the live audio broadcasting of the questions that the justices were asking of the attorneys. And I think it was one of my favorites, I'm saying that a little sarcastically, Susan Collins, was pinned down by a reporter and basically asked, well, given what you said during the hearings for what's the guy's name who
Kavanaugh.
Right. You basically said that he was going to favor existing law, and then those questions, came out from him during the broadcast, and it seemed that he was basically walking that back.
Yep.
And her point, I don't believe a word she says, but her point was an interesting one, which is, well, let's see how he actually votes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a dynamic that's underway here where, they may position, they may try out certain questions or certain, see how far they can go in establishing a rationale for changing their mind, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably likely that the court will basically walk back any notion of intelligence on this issue, but it's not done yet.
No, I agree.
This is in the rinse cycle right now.
No, I totally agree. But I do think whatever the outcome of that, my main point is the Supreme Court's become politicized, either successfully or not. We'll see. Well, it's becoming more and more politicized, as is the job of Attorney General, especially when politics is part of the case, as is the job of journalism. Things are becoming politicized, and independence just doesn't seem to have a very high status anymore.
I don't understand what independence means when you have strong parties pushing in opposite direction. What is independence? Being neutral, or trying to discern which party is telling the truth?
Well, then you end up in this world where truth and outcomes are relative. There's no absolutes anymore, and therefore no standards. I do actually think there has to be absolutes and standards, and I say that from a liberal point of view, that there is right and wrong, and I'm not convinced that ideas of right and wrong are very high in the minds of most, public servants anymore.
And this is a new development?
It's 4 years. It's been 4 years in the making.
How about Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? That was in 1946.
Okay, it's been 70 years in the making.
Thank you.
And truth, this whole thing about fake news is what you accuse the other side of always. So there is no such thing as news. Everything is fake news, depending on your point of view. So truth doesn't exist as a concept, even.
Well, then let's stop talking. Let's all leave. We're done.
Well, you've got to define the problem.
Well, we can just lie.
You have to define the problem to fix it, Michael. So I'm not giving in. I'm just describing an observation, really.
Well, it's fake observation then.
Exactly.
When right at the very beginning of the former guy's administration, I was on a panel for a show called TRT in London with a White House advisor to the former guy who was on the panel, and a couple of other journalists who were on the panel, and a couple of teachers that were on the panel. TRT is a pretty interesting organization that's a 24-hour online news service. The topic before the administration came into power was, are we living in a post-truth world? Not a post-truth administration, but they were trying to say, take a look at the way things are now. And that was something I don't recall having that kind of conversation, even with a group of journalists sitting around the table at the Rim before a show to talk about this. Didn't seem to me, that it was that kind of topic. You guys tell me if I'm wrong about that, but I don't remember that being a big topic of conversation. The idea,
Sitting
everyone
around
knew the
Ben-
idea that politicians lied. Everyone knew that. That wasn't new. But I think what was new was the depth of the lies and the fact that there became arms of journalism that accepted the lies. That hadn't happened yet.
I mean, I think the best politicians don't lie. They have a point of view and they're prepared to defend it. And the best of the best are fairly intellectual. They go back to frameworks and, they're transparent in why they arrive at a conclusion they arrive at. Even on extreme subjects like Roe versus Wade, I don't actually object to someone trying to make the case that life begins at conception. I disagree with them, but at least they're making the case. And so that's okay. What I think there's a difference between politicizing and lying.
Well, there's always data, interpretation of data, and then a conclusion about what you do about after you've analyzed it. But when you falsify the data, the whole enterprise collapses.
Yeah.
So when you have people who simply make things up and assert them with whole cloth with no evidence, but they have enough media presence to broadcast that assertion and repeat that assertion, then you're in a very strange world.
Well, you are, but I don't know what you all think. I don't think that most of the things I disagree with could be characterized as lies or misuse of facts. I think most of what I disagree with is different points of view. And if I was to attack only that section that was lying or misusing facts, I probably wouldn't win the argument because the strongest representative of the other side don't do that. They argue their case. So I'm not sure by focusing on lies or facts.
We're in a world
we
now where you have one party that insists that the last election was fraudulent and that the winner didn't win, that the loser is actually the real winner, and that whatever mechanisms we have right now to count votes and certify votes is false and has to be thrown out and a new one put in its place.
Yeah, but then you look at Virginia, where the guy who won took on what he called wokeness in schools around critical race theory, and won using opinion, not lies. So I think by focusing on what you correctly described, Michael, as the actual problem, I don't think it is the actual problem. I think it's a symptom of the problem. But the actual problem is individualism, the desire, not caring about others, not really having a point of view about society as a whole. The actual problem is way deeper than lies or misuse of facts.
Well, you can lie without lying. A guy in Virginia was one of the guys that he did that. And what he said was, that he promised that critical race theory would not be taught in schools in Virginia, when in fact, critical race theory wasn't even being taught in schools in Virginia. So that was, to me, that's a case of it's lying without really lying.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because people didn't vote for him because they thought it was being taught. They voted for him because he's racist, and they are too.
Yeah.
They voted because they got emotional.
Yeah, they
Well,
got emotional.
I think there are two.
The problem that we have in this society right now is that everybody is emotionally engaged. Very few people are engaged with the side of their brain that uses logic. And as a consequence, you have these big fights. And the emotion is being driven by the 24-hour news cycle and by a bunch of California billionaires who think it's more important to put out the results of their algorithmic calculations than to tell the truth.
Well, that's an opinion that you have. I'm not sure I share it.
Okay, I can find you some psychologists that would back me up.
How many,
We could start
how
with,
many psychologists do you, on the head of a pin are going to change the assumption that you're making about California billionaires?
just one, but the assumption really wants to have to change.
I like that. I don't know.
I think you'll find that lots of California billionaires have moved to Miami. The ones that are left are the good guys. Oops.
I'll
Did I say that out loud?
Let's talk about.
Well, there's a lot of
What are
change
people-
going on out there in California in these big companies, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about now. Michael Markman posted a screed, which I think is an excellent word, right up there with kibitz in terms of its actual definition.
Oh,
And but he posted this article by Professor Galloway, a well-known proselytizer for the tech industry. And it was about well, I don't know. Why did you post this? It was in the Gillmor Gang news feed in Telegram.
T.me/Gillmor Gang for those watching. Just type it into your browser. T.me/Gillmor Gang.
I thought
Well-oiled machine.
one of the bits of news that came out of the tech world was Jack Dorsey, no longer CEO of Twitter. But he is part of a company that just renamed itself. What's it called now? Block?
Yeah.
I thought they changed it from Block to, was it Square?
It was Square first.
Square.
Yeah, and then it
So-
became Block, yeah.
Well,
Well,
Square,
that's
In the
more
sense- in the
meta.
sense
They're going
that,
to acquire Stock and Barrel too.
no, but
Yeah.
Square is
in the
two-dimensional.
same way, in the same way.
Exactly,
that,
exactly. The Block is more meta.
Exactly. In the
3D.
same way that Zuckerberg created an umbrella brand for all of his companies. Now, Jack has an umbrella brand that could be for more than just one company. So one of the speculations.
So by quitting, he did what? How does that give him a meta brand? I'm not sure I understand.
No, by changing the name of Square to Block, he now has a company that can do more than just Square. So one of the things that that Galway speculates is that he could, under the umbrella of Block, acquire Twitter, and then Block would have Square and Twitter as part of its portfolio.
Okay, let's snap Gillmor Gang poll. And I will not participate in this because I work for one of the companies involved. But how many people think that Square Block will acquire Twitter, or will, as some of the other speculation in that article suggests, Salesforce might acquire Twitter?
Which one should we vote on first?
Either. Do you think any of those things are going to happen?
I definitely don't think Block is going to acquire Twitter, so I'll vote no on that.
Good. That's one. Anybody else?
I don't think Salesforce will acquire Twitter.
Okay, that's two. Anybody else?
what is that?
Not going to happen, right? Is that what Brent's saying?
Neither.
I do think Brett Taylor's role is kind of interesting. However, there's something you can learn there about the Valley, in particular, which is not the bad side of the Valley, but the good side of the Valley, which is people have each other's backs and care about outcomes for companies they don't work for. And it's one of the best things about the Valley. It's incredibly collaborative, and problems are discussed openly and fairly transparently, and people know each other because it's such a small place. So Brett Taylor's week of the change within Salesforce, which I know we can't really talk about, but on the other hand,
You can talk about anything you want to. I'm not going to talk about it.
board chairmanship at Twitter is to me a good Valley story, and he is, if you like, a safe pair of hands at Twitter from the point of view of the investors. And the new CEO probably needs somebody experienced that he can lean on as well. New CEO is a CTO really, who's become a CEO, and if he's been driving a lot of the change recently, he's clearly doing a really good job, because I think Twitter's been thriving at the product level.
And I heard a report today that he's planning on making some pretty big changes in the way that things are done at Twitter. I didn't read any details about that, but that seems to me to be what a lot of new guys, when they come in, try and do. But I don't know. The answer.
First of all, you haven't voted yet, Frank. So
no, I don't think it's going to happen.
Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say I have no insight into this whatsoever. It just has a feeling that there's more than one move going on in the Valley at the top. Obviously, am I incorrect in what I heard that there's going to come in and be that Benioff's going to have a co-chairman?
No,
something like our co-CEO.
It's a co-CEO at the title level, but Brett does report to Mark.
So,
but all the other folks now report to Brett that originally were reporting to Mark.
Yeah.
So, and then there was the big move at Twitter, obviously. I'm sure that there are other things going on out there that I haven't heard about that you guys know more about, but it just says to me that something's going on, and
it might key in, there's all these other rumors that there's going to be a massive wave of VC resignations, venture capitalist resignations. And the underlying narrative is there's a lot of people with a lot of money that have no reason to keep doing stuff. I don't buy that. I don't think the Valley is driven by how much money you've got, actually. And I don't think people stop doing stuff when they get a certain amount of money. There's people that do stuff and there's people that don't do stuff. And the people that do stuff tend to do stuff because they like it. So I'm not thinking, Mark Benioff and Jack Dorsey are two of a kind, kind of taking off to exotic places to relax, having done the heavy lifting. I don't buy that at all.
Oh, I don't know if I would say that it's money oriented. Money is a surrogate for time. We all only have so much time on this planet, and if you've got a big chunk of money, you suddenly realize, I think, that he who dies with the most toys wins is not an operative philosophy, and therefore, yeah, sorry. It's the guy with the most guitars wins. Okay, Frank.
I was just thinking that. I have lots of crap. I just got.
No, but so you get to a point where you say, gee, that the $1 billion out there on the margin isn't as attractive as sticking my toes in the sand.
But the $1 billion just went to Truth. How about that? Do we know where that money came from?
What?
I don't know what you just said.
The former guy's new digital company announced that they had $1 billion. I thought it was from VCs, but then I read later that there was a lot of institutional investors. They didn't name who the institutional investors were, and that was the interesting part of that.
And you believe anything that guy says?
Didn't come from him specifically, but no, I'm not saying I believe it. I find it interesting. Is that word again?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look at Larry Ellison. He's managed to build an Air Force and a Navy. He has his own island. He is fabulously wealthy. He's still working, but I would imagine that most folks out in the Valley and venture capital world don't want to see too many CEOs build an army and an Air Force.
Correct.
All right, so I just want to, since Dennis is going to have to leave shortly, not that he may or may not have any comment on this, but going back to Michael, so you're, what is it about the sense of what's going on right now, as proposed by Professor Galloway. Why did you think that that was an interesting thing?
What is interesting is not what will happen to Twitter and whether it will remain independent or be bought by one company or another. What is interesting is the main point of his article, which is this tendency to build super apps, to try and find one place that becomes like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the one application that helps you manage your life most seamlessly with the most functionality. When you look at the way Tim Cook is building out everything that Apple can do, from arranging for payments to running its own credit card, its own movie studio, its own phones, its own music distribution, they're building Apple into a super app. And that's clearly what Zuckerberg wants to do with Meta. People are now trying to establish this new realm of real estate. You could look at Amazon as a super app of retailing. They are building out. I remember when they first started, they were doing books, and then they began doing something else. And Dave Weiner published this very puzzled blog saying, "Oh no, they've just ruined their brand. The brand of Amazon is books. They'll never establish themselves selling anything but books." But that's not the case. Amazon is now a super brand that does everything from books to media to devices. And what Galloway is talking about is that this is the new battleground, finding the one ring to rule them all. And he thinks that that's what makes Twitter an interesting property, because you can see it in its current product development, that it's going beyond just a limited character message. It's now a multimedia messaging, and everybody wants to add commerce to their app, and everybody wants to add payments to their app, and dating to their app, and ride hailing to their app.
Okay, let's hold that thought right there. Any last comment, Dennis, before you jump?
Yeah, I think we're witnessing a holding pattern in tech. I don't care how many mergers and acquisitions happen. The software industry is in a holding pattern. I don't think what it's doing is terribly important anymore, simply because by mid-century there will be upwards of 40 countries that don't have enough water to supply drinking water or irrigation water for their crops. And they have names like Iran and Pakistan, and they're nuclear tipped, or they're on the verge of being nuclear. And we are going to be in a world of hurt if we don't move our attention, our technology attention, from how we can make electrons dance to how we desalinate seawater or find some other ways to provide the water that an increasingly drying out planet needs to have. End of sermonette.
Okay.
Amen.
Mike.
Bye, Dennis.
Nice to see you all.
Chow mein. Next time, Dennis, bring some cats. It's been a while, man.
But I think it's an interesting what Mike and
Hang on a
Dennis
second.
raised.
Did Brent have something to say, or was I?
Yeah, other than I can't believe that the Eagles only beating the Jets by 9. But anyway, what I wanted to say is kind of piggybacking off of what Michael was talking about, since you mentioned Amazon. And I just actually, Paul Greenberg sent me this morning, this article on CNBC about Amazon is making its own containers and bypassing supply chain chaos with chartered ships and long haul planes. To me, I think what may be even more interesting than this metaverse stuff, which is, I guess, digital everything for the most part.
Yeah, let's define that some other show.
Yeah, we'll define that some other show. But I think the more interesting thing is a company that could possibly combine digital and offline in a way that reaches more of what people need and what they do. And so when I see Amazon doing stuff like this, it feels like they're creating an ecosystem as a service where they're almost able to control. Well, they are the foundation of marketplaces and e-commerce, at least for the US, but more beyond that. But they have a really solid and growing physical presence that's becoming even more important in some ways than some of the stuff that we're talking about with all this metaverse stuff, because people want their stuff and all their stuff isn't digital. And I think I saw an article last week that by 2022, next year, Amazon will be the biggest shipper of anyone. So they're going to surpass FedEx, UPS, whoever else on shipping stuff. They're doing this stuff about containers and supply chains. They've got their physical locations scattered about, so they're able to. As a matter of fact, I just got this email from Amazon saying, "Hey, would you like to try doing a local pickup for your next order? We'll give you $10 off if you give it a shot." So basically, what they're trying to do is get people, to see that you can get your stuff delivered to your house, or we can, ship it to our locations that are close by, and then you can pick it up from there. So to me, the more interesting company, and I guess it's not a surprise since I do a show called Watching Amazon, is a company that can combine the digital and the physical in a way that gets even more ingrained in what we need or what we want.
You're absolutely right. I go into the Whole Foods in the Time Warner Center, and as you come down the escalator, to the left-hand side is the Amazon area. And I watched it get built, and I watched the number of boxes in the back of this Amazon area grow until now it's taken up a huge part of what used to be a place where people would go and sit and eat lunch. And folks are now coming in and using this Whole Foods as a place to bring things back and to receive stuff from Amazon. And that's between going and buying your fish and your beef and your veggies and stuff like that. You can stop at the Amazon booth and get something. And then, interestingly enough, in that same Time Warner Center is an Amazon bookstore. So you can do all of that stuff in the Amazon environment and then go upstairs and buy other products from Amazon. I see it as exactly what you're saying, Brent.
But that in a
One of
way
my
is
local malls, a similar thing happened. They opened a Whole Foods and they rented another storefront for another food short shop concept, which is a bricks and mortar shop that only carries stuff that gets 4-star ratings on their service, because they found people like to pick up things and hold them. I mean, conceptually, they don't limit themselves by what you think they are.
And then the way of buying stuff from an Amazon store where you don't even have to see a clerk and you don't have to go up to a counter and pay for it. You flash your Amazon, barcode as you walk into the store, and everything that you buy is charged as you walk out of the store.
Well, that's
I have no idea what this is, but there were a bunch of Amazon people testing something that looks like a box, almost like a baby carriage. That's a sort of robot, small delivery system. I don't know what they're planning to do with it, but they're not only doing container ships and trucks, they're doing things that are the size of a baby carriage.
Keith, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you try to analyze Amazon, you're compelled to conclude that they have a very clear end game that is nowhere near being reached, and they're prepared to invest the capital in moving towards it. If you look at the square feet of warehouse under management by Amazon, and its growth over the years and its penetration globally, it's just huge. It's interesting. I have a similar, one of the companies I'm involved with, Infarm, has a similar set of problems. It grows food, and it grows food at the edge, that is to say near people in cities using equipment. And it needs lots and lots and lots of money if it's going to feed lots and lots and lots of people, just like Amazon needs lots and lots of logistics and warehouse if it's going to deliver stuff or take stuff back from lots and lots of people. And the interesting thing about the world we live in is you can have a vision that literally might cost trillions of dollars to bring about. And as long as you can figure out how to stage it, the world will let you spend all your profits keeping growing until you've reached some endpoint where you can't grow anymore, which is maybe never. And Amazon is the best case of that. If you add up all the money they've spent and all the revenue they've earned in profit, they've spent way, way more money than they've made in profit. They keep doing corporate bonds to get more and more money to grow more and more quickly. And who are they serving? Well, you could say they're serving their shareholders, but I also think they're serving us. I mean, just how much more convenient is life with Amazon than it was without it? It's amazing. I've been able to buy,
especially in a pandemic, touchless is the magic word, basically.
Yep.
I don't want to interact with other people.
Well, if you add in YouTube to Amazon, you can go and learn about stuff and then go and buy it on Amazon,
Or buy it on Amazon and then go to YouTube to learn how to use it.
Stop spying on me, Keith.
Okay,
That's what I do.
Hang on a second. I don't want this. I want to loop this back. I want to loop this back to what Michael was talking about and why he posted this predictions article about super apps. I don't see the connection yet.
Oh, I do, Steve. I'm
asking Michael.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The connection between what and what?
Between his suppositions about super apps and this world that you guys are now describing of it's more of a hybrid world than I think you're saying at the moment. But it's both digital and it's not as opposed to the multiverse. It's part of what the multiverse will become.
Well, remember, there are two sides to this. One is the customer or the human interface. What do you as a customer, as a human, react to? And the other is the whole back end, which involves a huge amount of infrastructure and logistics. In both cases, they have to meet somewhere. And the question is, on the human side, how many different parts do you have to touch in order to manage your life? How many different apps do you have to open? How many different devices do you have to use in order to manage the things that are important to you? There is some value in trying to make that as convenient and useful as possible and as unified as possible. I mean, if you look at the number of, for instance, apps people have on their phones, the number of channels they have on their TV, the number of websites that they visit, it tends to narrow down to just a few. Even though you might have 500 channels available, most people only watch 11. They don't watch them all. And the same thing with subscription services. You can't subscribe to everything. So this trend to unification, both on the user interface side and on the back side, is something that I think is inevitable. Things aren't going to fragment.
I'm intrigued by the fact that you chose 11 channels that people watch. So why not
3?
10?
3. There's 3.
Well, I used to only have 3.
I was going to say, I think that if you're a creator, and I would think Bezos qualifies, as does Dorsey, as does Benioff, as does Cook, before him, Jobs.
Musk.
If you're a creator, you don't really have limits on the canvas in your brain. You just want to do the best you can to deliver whatever your vision is. So I think super apps are the inevitable outcome when smart people meet capital. When there's enough money to do what you can imagine, and people will give you that money, and your imagination isn't limited, you're going to try to do more and more. And there is a critique of that, which is, stay in your box. but I don't think it's realistic to expect creators to stay in their box. They're going to keep creating. You know, Musk is now doing space. Will he do desalination? Possibly. We should want him. We should want him to, right? So it feels to me as if this Galloway uses super app in a pejorative way. I feel. I don't know if you agree with that, Michael, but it feels pejorative to me. Whereas I think it's good.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's being pejorative. I mean, he's looking at this tendency. If that is what users and customers will find convenient and useful, that's what's going to win.
Yeah.
You know, there's
You know, if you
a long
can solve
list
that
of,
problem, you can solve that problem from a human engineering perspective, from a user interface design perspective. You have a big win.
yeah, I think that's overstated. I think there's a long list of people who've been predicting the emergence of AR and VR as being important. And, you know, eventually they'll be right, but it might be, you know, a footnote as to the, you know, the evolution of this economy.
It's funny. I'm in my private work, Steve. I'm working with an entrepreneur, quite well-known entrepreneur, who showed me this week the ability to render three-dimensional images without wearing anything, just through your eyes. It was kind of amazing, blew me away when I saw it, and that made me think, wow, if you can see, it does require a screen, so it's not a hologram. It comes out of a screen, but it's a normal 2D screen, any 2D screen. It suddenly this needing to wear a face mask goes away, and then things get a bit more interesting, except it needs a screen.
But isn't that very similar to this technology that we're starting to see in large billboards in Tokyo and in New York, where they have the 3D imagery of a lion that literally jumps out of the screen? Those are, I don't know if you've seen those things.
I haven't seen them.
I've never seen one in person, and apparently there was one in Times Square recently, and it's not there now. But there's a lot of video on YouTube of these incredible 3D billboards that I looked at and I'm going, oh my God, the cost of billboards already is astoundingly high. Imagine what these things must be.
I've seen one on YouTube where the Starship Enterprise comes out of the building, but
yeah,
I wasn't convinced that was actually real. It felt
you
like
know, it felt like it was fake. I did a bunch of research and I can't find anything that said it wasn't real.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe I was just taken in by it. I'll tell you something. If I was taken in by it, it's something I want to be a part of.
Well, the nice thing about
you
what
can
I
book a
saw
seat on that Starship Enterprise.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm there.
All right. So I want to give everybody a last shot at this one, starting with Brent Leary. Whatever. I mean, you know, you could say, well, that's all I have to say. That would be an acceptable response.
Go Rams. About 4. It's getting close to game time, so that's definitely all I have to say.
I'd like to know what you think of the 49ers revival, Brett.
I'm a Rams fan, Keith. What do you think I think of it?
No, but even as a Rams fan, where's it coming from? I thought the 49ers sucked and suddenly they look
depths
good.
Of hell. All right.
Keith, are you going to use your limited airtime here to discuss the 49ers, or do you have something else interesting to say?
Well, I would encourage everybody to look at That Was the Week this week, where I talk about seed investing based on an article my wife wrote for Crunchbase. More money is going into seed investing than ever before. More companies are dying that get seed funded than ever before. But it is a great time to be a seed investor because for every dollar invested in a seed company, other people later on are investing $20. So there's a lot of money coming behind you if you're a seed investor and invest in good companies. And it's all in, that's what my newsletter is about.
Isn't that the hard part? Finding the good company?
That's the hard part is investing in a good one.
Finding the good ones to invest in.
Yeah.
Hey, can I take back? I want to say one more thing because I didn't get a chance to say anything about the Beatles thing, and I don't think. Well, I think all of you guys are of the generations that listen to the Beatles in real time, like when they were actually together. I wasn't. So it was interesting. You know, from my perspective, it was interesting. I wasn't as enthralled as you guys. I'll be totally honest about it. There's a lot of slow points in there. And I did not understand Yoko Ono being in every piece of that, just sitting there, not really saying a whole lot. And the only time I remember her saying anything, she was yelling into the mic like a banshee, which I definitely didn't get. They kind of ignored her throughout the whole thing, which I thought was, to me, that was the fascinating thing. They pretty much ignored her the whole time, but she was there the whole time. I didn't understand.
There was an interesting dynamic. There was one entity was John and Yoko. And there was another entity called the Beatles. And, and they were both occupying the same space.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
just,
By the way, that screeching, Brent, is actually her music.
Yeah. I couldn't have had Yoko as a girlfriend. Any girlfriend that stays that close to me and followed me around that much and sat next to me when I was doing other stuff, I would have terminated that relationship real fast.
but she was older than him, right? I mean, she wasn't like a teenager. She was.
Right. Yes.
Well, she was about, I think she's about 10 years older than what John would have been.
Now,
So
she's
she
the
was
only one in the
close in
studio who was not under 30.
Wow, that is so. That's what that was the thing. The other thing, I have gained a lot of more respect for those dudes, particularly, I think, well, not particularly, but I thought Paul, I didn't know he did all the stuff he did. I didn't know he played not only the guitar,
Everything.
piano, and the drums, and wrote all the or co-wrote all the songs. I thought that was really cool to see that, and I really wish that he wouldn't have held up. That would have been cool to see Billy Preston as the fifth Beatle. That's like, well, I know they're ending it all, but still, it would have been kind of.
Well, absolutely. That is one of the miracles of the show, and I'm glad you brought him up because the first hour is a hard slog. They're really having trouble in the studio, and I was having trouble as a viewer watching them. When George quit, I was about to quit myself. But then when he came back with Billy Preston in tow, he fit in so seamlessly. He knew exactly what to do, and they knew he knew exactly what to do, and they welcomed it. And it suddenly changed the dynamic of the whole show. The other thing that changed was they moved out of that sound stage where they were lost into an actual studio. So there was something in the first hour that was very off-putting because they were combining performing and rehearsing and writing in a strange way in front of a cyclorama with professional lighting. When they got into a studio, they were just doing what they do in a studio.
So,
And
Michael, the only thing that you have to correct is each show is 3 hours. So the fact that you experienced it as an hour is interesting.
Yes. You're right. I meant
I was.
I meant episode.
I thought about those slow moments also every time it got slow, and I found myself sort of diving into things that were on the screen during those slow moments, and then the next thing I knew, it wasn't slow again. I mean, I think maybe that those of us of that generation that are on this call saw more in it than just the Beatles, and there were the relationships, and there was the Beatles, the band, and there was I was fascinated by all the additional man on the street interviews that were done when they were doing the concert on the roof. I love that stuff. I actually thought they could have done more with that. Because I thought they could have actually done more with the police, but that I thought was interesting. They gave them credits too, by the way.
They didn't know what to do. I felt sorry for that one dude. He was like, what can I really do? I mean, it's the Beatles. I guess I
Yeah.
got to go through the motions, but and then Peter Sellers, they could have done more with that part because I thought that was fascinating seeing him just roll through there for a few
I
minutes.
don't know how much
He
more they
decided
could
to
have
get
done.
out.
No, I thought it was, I thought that was fantastic the way he said, well, I got to get out of here.
Yeah,
It's
he
like,
was.
You know, I thought,
okay,
you know-
great. John Yoko,
Well,
fine.
he
bye.
He was
Kind of
You
weren't
guys-
paying that
desperate
much
to get
attention
out of
to him.
there.
It was
Let me say
like-
one more thing about the slow
there.
parts.
Oh, I'm not sure if we have time for it. Go ahead.
Short thing. No, if you look at any creative process, there are slow parts. If you
Yeah.
cut all of those out, it would have been a false documentary. If you just had a highlight reel, it wouldn't have been truthful.
You have to breathe.
The process, the songwriting process, to me was unbelievable. It was so good and it was so true. And the way that life in the studio feels, it felt like that to me. It actually felt cleaner. Maybe it was because of the quality of the footage. It felt cleaner in that studio than any of those studio sessions that I've had, that I've been involved in. They were just dirty and smelly and smoky, and the floors just got covered in. And now I suppose it was like that, but I didn't get that
though,
feeling.
Frank, I think it was a brand new studio. I think they were inaugurating the studio. It didn't
Yeah.
have
Well,
time.
yeah, I mean, if you know, they built the studio in this basement. It was not a great studio, not at any time.
I thought the control
That's
room
why
was
they went back to
incredibly
Abbey Road.
cramped. That was that's surprising. That the control room was so cramped. It's like they didn't have the equipment in the control room and they had to bring it in from EMI and from George's house.
Yeah.
And that's the couple of times they showed the wiring, which I was like fascinated by, with all the wires on the floor. That's a studio feel to me.
So the thing that I thought that the film accomplished is that by the end of it, I actually started to like those songs.
Yeah, that's true. Because I didn't like those were not my favorite albums for the most part. I mostly can't listen to them.
But I mean, Dig It
yeah,
Yeah.
Dig a Pony
is a great track,
Yeah,
but it took me, 73 hours to get there.
and I didn't know that Get Back was done in the context. I wrote a book all about immigration in England at that time. I had no idea Get Back was a song in the context of what was going on vis-a-vis immigration. I didn't know that. And
Well, it wasn't by the time it was released.
Yeah. Get
But
back better.
But when they were singing the fake lyrics that they didn't end up doing about Pakistan and everything, it was electric. I mean, they clearly were of that era. That was my brain at that time, was thinking exactly those things.
My other favorite part of it was John Lennon repeating, and now the Rolling Stones. He picked that up on like day 12. He was
did it
asked
all
to
the
do
time.
it by the director who had just finished a Rolling Stones documentary. This guy, he had two major rock and roll films which were suppressed for 50 years. The Rock and Roll Circus by the Stones, and then this thing.
You know what was interesting to me as well is the business guys that were buzzing around them. Some of them were there all the time. Others just came in. Like the guy who kept taking notes with the glasses, who was writing down the lyrics as they came out of their mouths. He was fascinating. But there was all these business guys that came in. I remember one had a black suit and he clearly didn't want to leave. And as he was leaving, he was on the stage saying, well, bye, I'm going. And everyone was thinking, get the fuck out of here. And he really didn't want to leave. So you could see there was this leechy business stuff around them that they did a pretty decent job of not letting in.
Yeah. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it, and certainly we all sat through it and got something different out of it, which is, what a good documentary is supposed to do. Should make you feel a lot of different things. And I thought it did that. Look, as a producer and as a former editor, a film editor of all things, I kept looking at it and saying, what would I cut in order to make it feel like it had more pace? And then after it was all over, I actually felt like, I wouldn't have cut anything. That was it did what it needed to do in its
No,
language.
I agree with that completely. The most difficult thing was to find somebody like what's his name?
Peter Jackson.
Yeah, to find somebody who had such a comprehensive understanding of what the material was really about. I mean, it was extraordinary. I mean, I've focused on the Beatles all my life, and I know
really,
yeah, and I know a lot about them. And I'm telling you, he didn't make one false note in the stuff that finally hit the screen. I mean, it was masterful.
I think
In
we have.
my life,
I think we have COVID to thank for that, because his original remit was to do a 2.5-hour movie for theatrical release.
Yeah,
and that proved to be impossible.
There's a text. There's a post that I'll put on the Keith.
Yep.
T.me.
Oh, t.me/Gillmor gang.
It's a machine now. We've got imitations of Keith by Frank. I mean, it's good. There's a post which basically in text details the conversation in the flower pot.
Yeah. That was good.
It was okay in the film. When you see it in text, you realize just what they were unsuppressing.
Yeah.
I mean, McCartney, for all of his attempts at control, he let him do it, and then he released it.
Yeah.
He gave it to somebody who he had no control over. And if you look at other rock and roll movies like The Last Waltz and this new Led Zeppelin film, I mean, those things are marvels in what is on the record and what is not off the record. All of that. There's a lot going on in these kinds of efforts, and rarely, if ever, has there been a level of transparency that McCartney basically allowed.
And it does, change.
Jackson said he sent his cut to the surviving Beatles and to the people who control the non-surviving Beatles, like Yoko and Harrison's widow, and he got back no notes. They all said release it as is, and he was shocked. He said, when he works for Warner Brothers, he gets pages and pages of notes. He's never had an experience like this where his client said, "No, perfect, just let it out."
Well, it changes the story, doesn't it, from the caricatured version? Now, the Beatles breaking up doesn't even feel like a bad thing or a tragic thing. It feels like an inevitable thing that they were all at peace with, in a way. But I'm only in the middle of episode 2, so maybe
McCartney turned into an alcoholic. Ringo went through 10 years of alcoholism.
But that
it wasn't like they that's fine.
Yeah, but staying together wouldn't have been an option. So
actually, three weeks after the rooftop concert, they were back in the studio doing Abbey Road.
Yeah.
No, actually, they were actually at a different studio doing "I Want You, She's So Heavy," which is probably the most direct suggestion of where they might have gone. And
was that recorded at Capitol in America, in LA?
It was recorded at Trident initially, and then they brought it back into Abbey Road and overdubbed it.
I had a friend who said, if you want to know what broke up the Beatles, it was all the years of touring. It was the toll of the period of Beatlemania, where they had absolutely no time to themselves and were in that fishbowl under that pressure, with that much demand on their time and attention. That's what broke up the Beatles.
there was a B3 sitting on the floor in Studio B at the Capitol Recording Studio in Los Angeles that had Billy Preston had signed his name in it, and they had memorialized this B3 and let it sit on the side and told people, go over and use the instrument, but don't touch the signature. It was very cool.
Well, I know that Brent has an
Higher calling.
alternative view of the Beatles.
It is, but it's I understand you guys. I mean, the equivalent would be if there was, if Prince would actually have allowed us to see what he did, how he created all that stuff he did.
Purple Rain, babe.
I would be completely enthralled. Every minute would be great.
But you see these records that he's released, this last one, they're essentially, get backs by him. It's 3 or 4 musicians, mostly live in the studio. And then you see some of the footage. He was very transparent, and it pays off for him because, the further away we get from his being on Earth, the more we understand about how brilliant he was.
Yeah, but I guess what I was saying is when Prince, when I turned 13, his Dirty Minds album came out. So I literally came of age with Prince because every year he had a new album in my early teens going into my, the rest of my life. But that was his sweet spot. So if there was like 100 hours of footage of him creating, something, like what the Beatles did, I'll be enthralled. The later years, pretty cool. I mean, I still love the stuff, but you guys were how old when Get Back was done? So this kind of took.
Yeah, but I mean, that was not a peak either.
It's not just how old we were. The living through the period where you waited for each release, when you knew a new album was coming out, and you had to be in the record store on Tuesday to get it when it was new, and it was.
But to me, that's a part of that would be a part of the age. Like, I'm 54 now. I would not be, if somebody said they're going to release a new Prince album, which they do, I'm like, oh, that's cool. But when I was 16, 15, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd have to go like immediately and just hang out at the store 3 days ahead of time.
Yeah, and I was working at a radio station when this Get Back record was released unofficially to radio stations, and I was not happy.
You didn't like it?
No, I thought it was terrible.
Oh God, I liked it
only
in the beginning.
Years later. Oh, come on.
But you had to
Abbey Road.
But I was also Abbey. That's just a totally different kind of thing. I was a huge fan, Brent, of James Brown in 1965, and I was exactly the same way every time a James Brown album came out. I would have loved to have seen a behind the scenes of how he came up with those songs and how he got his band together and what he did. To me, James Brown was Prince before Prince was Prince.
Yeah, but how old were you in 65? That's what I'm saying. If a documentary of him and coming out and doing something that he did in 65, that brings you right back to how old you were in 65 when that song came. That's what I'm saying. I could understand why you guys have a different kind of perspective than me, because you were there at the time, and this documentary kind of takes you back to that age at that time.
I was 15 in 69. Funnily enough, there's a new Kenneth Branagh movie called Belfast.
Oh, so good.
It's got Van Morrison soundtrack mostly, but that was the same year. It was set in 69. And then I watched the part 2 of the Beatles thing afterwards, which was also 69. It's actually worth watching them both together in the same sitting. It gives you a sense of what was going on in those times. It was amazing. But on that note, I've got to go. I'm late for a meeting.
Ciao, Maine.
Take care.
All right. And thanks. I want to thank, let's see, who else left? Dennis Pombrian. Thank you, sir. What? Oh, okay. And I want to thank Michael Markman.
Thank you. I want to thank you all.
I want to thank Frank Radis.
Thanks. Interesting show, guys.
I'm glad that you have survived. And we'll go back to our Friday night.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was the one that caused the problem. I was so sick yesterday. And woke up this morning, at least I could breathe and wasn't coughing all night. So,
Wow. You feeling?
and no COVID, by the way. I had 2 different kinds of tests in the last 3 days. So,
Do they have an Omicron test now or something?
no, but I took a blood test as well. So it was, so I had I did that plus the nasal swab thing. So I did both tests, and that's about as good as you can get right now.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, it's free on every corner in New York City. And in London, you can go into a drugstore and they'll give you a box of home tests with 7 home tests in it. They'll give it to you. You can walk out with 3 or 4 of those boxes if you want. They don't care. And you take them home and you take the tests and you send the results in to the NHS. Here now they're trying to do the same thing, but charging $20 a test for one.
That's not going to work.
Well, that's soon to be covered, I think. But
I think there was some issues about that. It just seemed wrong. Anyway.
Well, I agree.
Brent Leary, thank you very much.
Thank you for ending before 4 o'clock.
Okay, good luck with your Rams obsession.
We'll need them.
You'll need it, I hear.
I agree.
I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a nice show, guys. And I just wanted to say that our hearts are going out to the families and students of Oxford High School in Michigan, a school that's close to where I grew up and a school where some of my relatives have children there. And it's been a heartbreaking week for everybody. Let's work to stop these tragedies from happening. It's too much.
Yeah.
Yep. I totally agree.
Yep.
Thanks to everybody who showed up and especially those who couldn't. Well, bye-bye.
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 See you guys. Thanks a lot I'll see you next week.
See ya.
By the way, that